Your monthly subscription box from Postflybox.com includes all the materials needed to tie a dozen flies, along with some extra goodies. The humpy is a wonderful old dry fly that really doesn't imitate any one insect in particular, but many in general. What makes the humpy truly great, however, is how well it floats. Begin by picking up one of the hooks, here a size 14. Then, get it firmly secured in the jaws of your tying vise. Load a bobbin with the thread spool. For this humpy, we'll be using red. Get your thread started about 1/3 of the way down the hook shank and take a few wraps rearward, then back up to the starting point before snipping the tag end off close. Strip the lower fuzzy fibers free from a single mallard flank feather. Ideally, the tips of the feather should be aligned. Gently pull down on the lower fibers to isolate the feather's tip, then snip it off close. Orient the feather so the tips are pointing to the right, and then fold the two sides together to form a single clump of fibers. Measure to form a wing as long as the distance between the hook barb and the back edge of the eye. Transfer this measurement forward to the tie-in point, and using a pinch wrap, begin securing the fibers to the top of the hook shank. Take a few touching wraps rearward, binding the fibers down as you go. Then, pick up your tying scissors and use them to snip the butt ends off at a shallow angle. Continue taking thread wraps rearward to cover up the ends and then back forward to just in front of the midpoint of the hook shank. Separate out a small clump of deer hair and then snip it free from the hide. While holding the tips of the hair, strip out the shorter hairs and fuzzy fibers from the butts. If there are any overly long tips, strip them out as well. Place the clump, tips first, into a stacker and give them a real good stacking. Separate the stacker and carefully get hold of the deer hair tips. Transfer the clump to your right hand, then measure to form a short tail just a little more than a hook gap in length. Pass the clump back to your left hand and squeeze it tight. Reach in with your scissors and snip the butt ends off square directly in line with your tying thread. Give your bobbin a gentle counterclockwise spin. This will make the first thread wrap jump slightly rearward to catch the very butt ends of the hair. Take a few more thread wraps to really compress and secure the hair at this point. Then, as you pull up on the deer hair, begin making somewhat looser open spiral wraps with the thread down the shank almost to the hook barb. Continue making open spiral wraps forward to the initial tie-in location. Select another similar sized clump of deer hair and snip it free from the hide. Clean out the butt ends as you did before, but this time there's no need for stacking. Simply snip the butt ends off square. After giving your bobbin a light counterclockwise spin, place these snipped butt ends right over top of your tying thread. Again, the thread should jump slightly rearward to catch the butts. Bind the hair down in the same manner as you did before. As you approach the base of the tail, apply more thread tension to further compress the deer hair and create a gentle taper to the abdomen of the fly. Make sure the thread wraps go all the way to the base of the tail, right above the hook barb. Take somewhat loose open spiral wraps forward once again to the initial tie-in point. Select a single strand of glow-bright red floss and double it over at its midpoint around your tying thread. Use thread wraps to secure the material, then begin making wraps with the floss rearward behind the thread. Tension from the thread will help the two strands stay together. Cover any exposed deer hair with the floss all the way back to the base of the tail. Then, place the floss behind your thread and start making forward wraps with it. Toward the front of the abdomen, you can really start adding bulk to the body if you like. Chunky humpies tend to look better than slim ones. Anchor the floss with wraps of tying thread, then snip the excess off close. Gently pull the butt ends of the deer hair forward over top of the floss body like so. Try your best to keep the hairs nice and straight. Take 3 or 4 wraps of tying thread over top of the deer hair. Center the clump on top of the shank, then lift the tip ends up to vertical and pull down fairly hard on your tying thread to close the wraps. Continue taking thread wraps over top of the hair, working your way rearward. The hair needs to be bound down really well. Lift the hair tips up to vertical and snip them off close, like so. Take wraps of tying thread through the snipped off ends to smooth the area. Pull the wing material back and build a small thread dam in front of it to prop it up. Separate the fibers into 2 equal clumps and make diagonal cross wraps between them. With the cross wraps complete, take a full turn or two around just the hook shank to effectively save your work. Finish by making a figure 8 wrap between the 2 wings, then a few more wraps around just the shank. Pick up an appropriately sized grizzly hackle and a brown one as well. Pull down on the lower webby fibers and strip them free from the stem. Snip the butt end of the feather off, leaving about a 1/4 inch of bare stem. Repeat the same procedure on the brown feather. With the feather's shiny side facing up, lay the bare stem against the near side of the hook and take thread wraps to secure it. Do the same with the other hackle feather and bind them both down all the way up to just behind the hook eye. Get hold of one of the feathers and begin making wraps with it, first 2 or 3 behind the wing, then 2 or 3 in front of it. Behind the hook eye, secure the hackle feather with 3 or 4 tight turns of tying thread and then snip the excess off close. If you've trapped any hackle fibers, snip them away as well. Now, get hold of the second hackle feather and start making wraps with it between the wraps of the first. Again, 2 to 3 turns behind the wing, then 2 or 3 in front. As before, secure the hackle feather with a few tight wraps of tying thread. Use the thumb and index finger of your left hand to pull the hackle fibers rearward and take a few more thread wraps to hold everything back away from the hook eye. Do a 3 or 4 turn whip finish, seat the knot well, and then snip your tying thread free. Trim out any fibers that might block the hook eye, and finally pull the tip of the hackle feather forward and trim the excess off close. And that's the venerable Humpy, ready to fish and float in all but the fastest of tumbling runs and riffles.